If I told you that this pile of metal that fits in my hand is an espresso machine, would you believe me? Check this out. Boom. Okay, so I have a soft spot for Flair because I cut my teeth on the Pro 2, and a huge chunk of what I know about espresso I owe to that machine. It's also been a while since we've reviewed a Flair here, so I'm very excited for this. This is called the Go, and as the name suggests, it's their first proper travel brewer. I know people have been trying to pack away their Flairs, even the 58 in a suitcase, and try weird things to travel with it. So here's Flair's answer. What I'm really curious to find out is if they've had to make any compromises in order to achieve this level of portability, or does this perform as well as the other Flairs do? Now, before we get started, this machine was sent to us by Flair. We do get to keep it, but no money exchanged hands. They've had absolutely no say in what we've put in this video, and they don't get to watch it before any of you do. As always, a massive thanks to Benki Brewing Tools for helping with all of the logistics. If you're in India and you're looking to buy coffee gear, then check the link in the description below to get 5% off. It also helps the channel. The light through the window is changing dramatically, so if the background in this video keeps shifting from bright to dark, then I'm really sorry. First, let's open it up and see what comes in the box. You have a really nice travel case, and then, of course, the frame which folds down. You get a piston with a pressure gauge, the brew chamber, and a portafilter basket. A shower screen that you can place on top of the portafilter basket, or you get a puck screen which goes directly on top of your bed of coffee. You can use either. I prefer the puck screen. Now, I don't know if it ships with both of these, but they were sent to me, so just keep that in mind and check before you order. You also get a dosing funnel, which makes it way easier to get the grounds into the basket. This, which is probably the cutest little tamper that I've ever seen. The UX is okay, but yeah, super cute. Love it. You also get this silicone preheat cap that we've seen in other Flairs, and I'll show you how that works a little later on. And lastly, you get this, which is essentially a spout for the bottomless portafilter. I don't like using it, but if you think you're going to be making a mess, then just pop that on there. Okay, moving on to aesthetics. I think this is a very interesting looking brewer, but not particularly pretty. I just think that someone walking past it would definitely notice it and would start a conversation, but I don't see them saying, wow, that's such a beautiful looking product. That's just my opinion. To me, it looks quite skeletal. It's almost like bones with joints. But the thing that I do like is the texture and the paint. There's this sparkle when it catches the light, which I really like. I also really like the red accents, but the way that this logo is pasted on is pretty shoddy. What doesn't do it for me is this assembly of the piston, brew chamber, and basket. Even the basket, I would probably let that slide. But these two just look like they borrowed from another brewer. I think they could have done something a little more, maybe to the sleeve or the color of the piston, to make it fit better with the aesthetic of the rest of the brewer, especially this military green one. So yeah, that's aesthetics. This is definitely the weirdest looking in their lineup of products, but still very much looks like a Flair. Okay, moving on. The build quality on the Flair GO is kind of like my mind. Some parts, solid. Other parts, a little unstable. Let me explain. Now, these sections are not cast aluminium, but forged aluminium, so they're even stronger. I don't even have an issue with these joints, this one, or even this one. In fact, there's a video on the Flair channel, I think it's a short, of Charles from R&D standing on this with his entire weight, and it doesn't flinch. So you're not going to be breaking this anytime soon. So you may be confused what my issue is. Well, it's this one joint here. This mechanism is actually really cool from a design standpoint, and I'll show it to you in more detail in a second, but this happens. And when this happens, and you have a brew chamber that's filled with boiling hot water, and it's pressurized at 9 bars, it can be quite unnerving. With a little bit of practice and the right technique, that fear goes away, but you still have another issue, which we'll look at in more detail when we're brewing coffee. But this amount of play causes the roller that pushes the piston down to be misaligned, and that can have some pretty big issues. Now, Flair has put out a video on how to resolve this, but the solution they gave me didn't fully fix the problem. I know a lot of people online have also complained about this. Luckily, we got you covered. I have figured out a way to calibrate this so that you get butter smooth pulls every single time. Stick around for that. But moving on, we have this assembly again, which is from previous Flair, so I won't dwell on it too much. The brew chamber is really well made. I like that it's thinner. They call it no preheat, but we'll be testing that soon. Now the piston is pretty strong, but it is all plastic. So over time, being exposed to heat and stress, it can become more brittle and crack. So that's a part that may need to be replaced on occasion. And the basket, much like me, is thin and under a lot of pressure. So we'll have to wait and see how well it holds up over time. Oh, and another thing that I forgot to mention is the delightful unboxing process. With the Go, you open up the box and you feel like you've received a secondhand product. Sorry, a pre-loved product. Check this out. Yep, scratches, dents, fading paint. I mean, yes, it is a travel brewer, so if I see one that's traveled a lot and has battle wounds that's beat up, that's cool. But I really do think the customer should have the pleasure of opening up a brand new product and have it be in pristine condition. It's not that hard to do. Just add a little bit of padding anywhere there's metal-to-metal contact. Come on. But now, before we make some coffee, I'd like to quickly talk about portability. Now this folds down pretty small and it fits in my hand. My hands are pretty large, but it does fit in my hand. The thing is, it's still larger than the PicoPresso and heavier. So if you want ultimate portability from a machine that can actually brew at 9 bars of pressure, I think that still wins. But this is still the most portable direct lever machine. But before we move on, if you enjoy our content, then go and hit that like and subscribe button. I'll wait. Thank you. Okay, let's make some coffee. I think I have everything I need here. Today we're going to be brewing an Ethiopian Sidama from Boone Coffee Roasters. I would say it's on the slightly darker side of medium. I have it ground up here and we ground pretty coarsely for this basket. So let me prep the puck and then I may need to run out for a second to get hot water. I'll be using the shaker because it's just a little easier to get the coffee in here. As you can see, because it's a bit of a darker roast, it takes up quite a bit of volume. And so I will need to give this a little bit of a shake and so yeah, give it a few taps so that you can lower the grounds into the basket and then tamp. I usually do this standing up, but I like to use my thumbs and do one like this, turn it 90 degrees and give it another tamp so that I know it's level and then pull it out. You will have some grounds stuck to the tamper. It's a bit annoying. This basket is a little tapered and the tamper doesn't quite fit at the top of the basket, but it is what it is. I'm going to be using the puck screen. I prefer this to the shower screen, but I'll tell you one thing that you need to pay attention to if you are using this. All right, we're all assembled. I'm going to get this onto the stand. Let me go get some water. I'm back. We have water straight off boil and I haven't preheated this chamber. It's a fairly developed roast, so we should be good. We'll see how it goes. Now, when you're filling this, I would say don't pour too aggressively, at least in the beginning, because it can dig a hole in the puck. You have to tilt it a little bit to get the piston in. And then this is really important. Before pulling your shot, just straighten the back leg if it isn't already. And then lower the piston a little bit. I think we're ready to pull this shot. Pre-infusing at 3 bars, and then I'm going to ramp up to 8. And I'm just going to hold this at 8 for a bit. And then slowly start ramping down. Almost done. I'm done at 5 bars now. And 30. 15 in, 30 out in about 40 seconds. The timing is perfect. Let's see how the shot tastes. Little swirl. It smells very nice. That's a really tasty shot of espresso. And I don't think we had any issues with temperature here, but this is more developed. We'll be looking at the no preheat claims a little later on. And then we can talk about some of the things I like to do in order to get the best results with the Go. Okay, now that I have some coffee in me, I think I'd like to talk about best practices and some of the things that I've been doing to get excellent results with the Go. And yes, serious business, so I do have my notes here. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. First up, we have dose. So this basket is rated for 12 to 18 grams of coffee, but I wouldn't recommend anything over 14 or 15. This is the sweet spot that I found for a couple of reasons. One, it's pretty easy to get that amount of coffee into the basket and tamp. And two, the brew chamber capacity is pretty limited. Now, if you fill it up to the max fill line and you push the lever all the way down, you'll get around 34 or 35 grams of water out. And if you let the residual pressure push the rest of the water out, you'll get a max of around 40 grams of water out. So if you dose too much in here, you're not going to get a high enough ratio to be able to brew anything medium or lighter. So yeah, 14 to 15 grams. But if you're brewing something really light, I would advise you to go even lower, maybe down to 12. That way you can get to that 1:3 ratio and get a proper extraction. Next up, we have alignment. And this is something that has affected a lot of people, me included. In fact, I reached out to Flair to find out if there was something wrong with my unit. Basically, straight out of the box, this roller may not be aligned properly with the piston to push it down straight. So it will tilt and then catch on the inside of this brew chamber, and you will find that you get this super jerky pull, and the pressure curve will probably look like an ECG at this point. So what you want to do is calibrate the device. So after a little bit of tinkering, this is the way that I found to calibrate the device in order to get buttery smooth pulls every single time. Basically, open out the frame, put the brew chamber assembly on, make sure the piston is all the way down. Then what you want to do is make sure that the back foot is sitting flat on the table. If it's pushed outwards, just push it back in like this. Then gently push down on the lever and check where the roller meets the piston. If it's not dead center, you need to adjust the rear adjustment screw counterclockwise or clockwise to make sure that it's not too far back or too far forward. And once that's done, you're calibrated. Then all you need to do is, before pulling every shot, just make sure that this back leg is sitting flat. Pull your shot, it should be buttery smooth every single time. If any of you have had this issue, then let me know in the comments below, and I would love to know if this fixes it. Alright, so next up we have temperature, and Flair claims that this brew cylinder does not need to be preheated. Let's see if that's true. Okay, here you can see when you pour boiling hot water into the brew chamber, you can hit around 83 or 84 degrees Celsius, which is fine for dark roasts. But there's a big caveat. We're in India and the ambient temperature is around 27 to 29 degrees Celsius. So if you're up in the mountains and your ambient temperature is around 10 to 15 degrees, you're going to have a lot more heat sucked out of that water. So your results will vary based on where you are and how hot or cold it is. Where I'm at, I can get away without preheating if I'm brewing anything dark or medium dark, but anything medium or lighter, I definitely recommend preheating. So the way that you do that is you could use the silicone cap and you can fill, wait for 15 to 20 seconds and dump. And as you can see, if you're quick with one round of preheating, you can get up to 90, which is fine for medium roasts. And if you're brewing anything lighter, then I would recommend 2 or 3 cycles of this to get up to 93 or 94. But for me, that is way too much of a faff. So I found steam preheating to be way quicker and much more efficient. So here's how I like to do it. I've seen a lot of people steam preheat and just plonk the brew chamber on top of a kettle using a silicone funnel or something like a stainless steel holder like the one I'm using. But there's a way to make it way more efficient and quicker, and that is to cover it using a cupping bowl or something of that sort. This has allowed me to get the brew chamber much hotter a lot quicker. And as you can see, with just a quick 2 to 3 minute steam preheat, I'm able to get to 93, 94 degrees Celsius, which is plenty to pull light roasts and extract them well. So way better than having to fill and dump, fill and dump. I just can't be asked to do that. So in conclusion, I would say that this performs substantially better than the older ones, which were super thick, but I wouldn't call it no preheat. Maybe low preheat, but that's very tepid from a marketing standpoint, so I get it. And lastly, we have pressure. So with flares or direct levers in general, I like to gently ramp up to 8 bars of pressure, hover around there, and then slowly ramp down to 5 or 6 to finish out the shot. You can do longer pre-infusions if you want and your coffee demands it. But yeah, hover around 8 bars, gently ramp down, and you'll get delicious espresso. So yeah, those are some of the things that I like to do, and they've given me excellent results on this machine, and hopefully they help you too. But now, let's talk user experience. Having used this almost every day for a couple of months now, let's look at some of the things that I like and dislike about this brewer. Okay, in no particular order, I'll kick things off with the frame. I really love how this thing folds down. Even that mechanism here is very, very cool. In fact, it's pretty addictive. I almost use this like a fidget toy. I keep folding it and unfolding it. I don't know if any of you guys do that. And while I did complain about the stability, the 3 points of contact actually make it a little easier to use on uneven surfaces, which is great considering it's a travel brewer. Now, staying on the topic of portability, I'd like to go back to the question that I opened this video with. Have they had to make any compromises in order to achieve this? Well, the answer would be a little bit. And it's mostly on the ergonomics and workflow front. Because of this little bit of a wobble and the fact that it's all metal without any padding, it's just a little less comfortable to pull shots on this than say the Classic or the Pro 2. Not by much, but you will notice it if you've used some of their other models. The other slightly more annoying one is the alignment issue. Now, this I'm sure is going to affect a lot of people and already has, so hopefully Flair figure out a way to ship these calibrated or are able to include detailed instructions on how to avoid this from the get-go. That's about it. But speaking about workflow, if you exclude the Flair 58, it's a bit clunky on all the other Flairs. You have multiple parts that you need to put together, the brew chamber needs to be preheated, and then you need to act pretty quick in order to get those higher brew temperatures. Not a showstopper, but it definitely takes a bit of getting used to and something that I think is worth mentioning. The other thing that I do not care for is cleanup. Again, with the 58, it's amazing because when you pull the lever up, it retracts the plunger and then you can push it back down and purge the excess water. You can't do that on any of the other Flairs. So you are going to have residual water, and once you pull it out, which you need to do over a sink, you're going to have a loose motion situation and you've got to go and deal with that after every single shot. Again, not a deal breaker, but it is a bit annoying. Now moving on, I love that the basket is a smaller diameter because you have taller pucks and these are way more forgiving. And being a travel brewer, I think it's great that a customer doesn't have to be super anal with their puck prep to get delicious shots. Just remember to not overfill it. 14 to 15 grams is the sweet spot. The other thing that's really cool is you can get a pod attachment for this, and as much as I dislike pods, the convenience is undeniable. So I think it's cool that they included that. The brew chamber, while technically isn't no preheat, I do think it's a big improvement over the previous one, which had very thick walls and sucked a ton of heat out of the water. Oh, and I almost forgot, this max fill line is barely visible, which is super annoying. Another thing that I really like is that the brew path is almost all metal. But it's also annoying that it's almost all metal because the plunger is plastic. Now, I think there's an easy fix. They can just make the bottom plate of the plunger stainless steel. And that way, I can worry a little less about having microplastics in my testicles. The other issue with the plunger is that it's exposed to high temperatures and stress, so the plastic will get brittle and crack over time. Luckily, it's easily replaceable. And lastly, we have this cute little tamper, and while I do like how it looks, it's not particularly nice to use. The ergonomics aren't great. And like I said, because the basket is tapered, you have grounds that make their way on top of the tamper, and when you pull it out, it is a bit of a mess. That about wraps up what I like and dislike about this brewer, but now let's look at price and who it's for. So at $199 US, I think it's priced very competitively and goes head to head with the PicoPresso, the current champion of portability if you ask me. The PicoPresso is $129, but if you include the $60 gauge, then I think it's a very fair competition. So which one should you get? Well, that depends on what you're solving for. If the most important thing to you is portability, then the PicoPresso wins hands down. It's both smaller and lighter than the Go. But if you're concerned about build quality and the quality of the espresso, then I think the Flair GO wins. Like I just said, here you have an almost all metal brew path, and even most of the components are metal. It's really well built. It's going to last you a long time. The PicoPresso, on the other hand, is almost all plastic. So there is no real comparison when it comes to build quality. And then when we talk about the quality of the espresso, I think that a direct lever machine gives you the most control over your pressure profile. Using the pump on the PicoPresso actually feels like you're playing Flappy Bird. I don't know if you've played that game. So trying to maintain a constant pressure or replicate a pressure profile is quite a bit more challenging than it is on the Go. So yeah, portability, the PicoPresso, build quality and shot quality, the Flair GO. And lastly, if you don't really care about portability, but you still want a direct lever, then I would probably spend a little bit more money and get something like the Classic with the pressure gauge. That way, I have something that sits nicer on the countertop, is a little more stable, feels a little nicer to brew, and looks nicer in my opinion. Otherwise, if you don't care about the plastic build, get the Flex and save a little bit of money. So yeah, that's the Flair GO, and I think it's a worthy addition to the Flair lineup. But now, I'd love to hear from you. Do any of you own this? What has your experience been like, and do you have any other questions? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and brew ARAMSE.